Hello there, this is Greg Aden from Denver, Colorado with Aden Leadership and another episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. With me today is David Rogers, a variety of backgrounds. I'll let you introduce yourself here in a minute, David, but again, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to join you. And I'm coming from snowy white Breckenridge, Colorado, which is an interesting place to be this time of year. So
Rumor has it you got some snow last night and it's
we
crystal blue
did.
skies.
I had a friend who was skiing at the top of the mountain late in the afternoon, and their expression was that it was puking powder at the top of the mountain. So
Yeah.
for those skiers, I think that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to know you, David. A couple of questions. What do you do, and why do you do it? And then before that, answer how did you get to where you are today? Not necessarily Breckenridge, but give us a little bit about your background. But I'd love for you to focus on why you do what you do.
Well, thank you. It's a great question. So, in the context of our conversation today and my involvement with you, I work for a company called 408 Productions, and we are a documentary and movie and video production company based out of LA, founded about 6 years ago by an Emmy Award-winning producer and founder by the name of Nick Davis. And we specialize in trying to bring stories to life, whether that be a story about an event, a venue, an individual, or in the case of our program working with you, it's about bringing really important content about leadership and culture and development to the public through a live streaming format. And obviously having to be creative about how we do that, given the constraints of our pandemic and how that impacts gathering and conveyance of information. So in that respect, super excited to be working with you on this project.
Me too.
And for me personally, the topic is really interesting because I've been a career person in the healthcare industry, worked in hospitals for over 3 decades, and have been a leader in varying roles. And I think the important thing that I would suggest is that everyone in any role has leadership opportunities.
Yeah.
And how you express those and how you're supported in that effort, how that is valued or not, can be a very important part of the culture of your organization.
Sure.
And so I've worked from front lines, interacting with patients, to vice president level as a member of an executive team. And every one of those layers brings a different set of challenges, but leadership qualities are important across that whole spectrum.
Yeah, you mentioned the Leadership Development Day. We'll talk at length about that in a minute, but I do want to recognize Lois Todd of Alchemy, who had done some work with you and your group, and she recommended you, and per her recommendation, you reached out, and we got to know each other, and what I felt right away was just an immediate kinship, trust. You were aware, you were listening. Which my guest just prior to you were talking about the number one quality of a great leader in his words were a listener. Let's just listen better. But you got it, is what I'm trying to get to. You saw the vision and you said, we want to work with you. So for that, I really appreciate you, David.
Well, thank you for the trust that you have shown. And trust, I think, is one of the underlying themes of effective leadership. And we'll probably get into that a little bit. To acknowledge Lois Todd, Lois and I became professionally acquainted about 10 years ago when I was serving as the administrative director for the Heart Institute at Children's Hospital here in Colorado. And our team was interested in developing a more clear vision about what our objectives were, what our communication style would look like, what our culture was going to be, who our customers were, et cetera. And so we retained Lois through her company Alchemy and her artist Chris, who helps a team develop a metaphoric representation of what they're all about. And the creative process in order to achieve that is really inspiring and team building. Our metaphor was an orchestra, and how we went about conducting ourselves and playing our instruments in such a way that the patient and the family who would experience our program would come onto stage at a point in life where there was fear and anxiety and trepidation and illness, and hopefully through their interaction with our team, leave on the other end with greater security and greater comfort and a greater understanding of their future and opportunity. And so that interaction between Lois and I has led to now decade-long friendship, both professionally and personally. And
Sure.
so when I heard about the work that she was doing as a speaker on your panel, and I shared with her some of the work that I'm doing now professionally, it's what created the genesis for this conversation.
Absolutely. Connections. I mean, the right connections at the right time can create so much opportunity. And I'm not I don't believe I'm an opportunist. I just appreciate real, authentic connections. And before Lois Todd, there was Todd Musselman. Todd Musselman and I have known each other and done a lot of deep work together and been in accountability groups. And I asked him, I said, Todd, I'm looking for some really powerful, interesting female speakers. And the first name out of his mouth was Lois Todd. So one connection begets another connection, and through you, we're going to create millions of connections because there's going to be thousands of people watching it, and then they're going to impact and influence others. So it's amazing where the seed comes from, and then it just grows.
People use the expression paying it forward, and people like Lois, who have a unique and profound perspective about leadership and how to help teams develop and how to help create culture that is effective and engaging, when they bring that knowledge forward and share it with others, as you said, it's a bit of a pyramid. You have this change agent, this sort of deep thinking savant at the top who puts that knowledge out in front of other people. They grab the pearls that they can actualize within their own organizations, and everyone ultimately gets better. And you, to your credit, have put together 16 speakers who are going to bring all of their own unique perspective about that to the table, which is just gosh, it's almost unprecedented to have a gathering of that nature, especially under these circumstances.
Let's
I
do
think
it.
for the listeners, it's going to be a day of growth and learning that's going to be really profound. So I'm excited
So
to be part of the audience.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you're in all of our hearts and with your team, and Nick has, by the way, Nick has been just fantastic to work with. Nick Davis, if you're listening, um, it's like a brother I didn't have already, and he's really cool, and he's reached out to Chad Jameson of Truth Talks to help on the work with, and Chad Jameson and Truth Talks is who produces Aden Leadership, this podcast. So let's dive into the big topic, right? Leadership. What say you, David Rogers, to the leaders that are listening, right, that really want to be better because they want to? Not the leaders that aren't listening, because if they're not listening, they don't care, and they're full of themselves.
Well,
We call that.
we'll draw them in and help them care if they're not there yet. So
We'll invite them again. But I have little patience for ego and narcissism and arrogance. But so let's go back to the people that are listening. What would you say to the leaders that want to get better?
right. Well, we are certainly under unique times and circumstances, and I think one of the obligations of leaders today is to really think about how the environment and the circumstances of COVID and so on has changed the dynamic of how people work, how people interact, and the kinds of pressures that they're dealing with every day. An example might be, as sort of silly as this might sound, perhaps you're a professional mother who has a baby and you're working from home and expected to be on Zoom calls, 8 or 10 hours a day. And at the same time, you have a crying infant who needs to
Right.
breastfeed. And you're trying to juggle all of these pressures. Or maybe you're a parent who has kids who are in school one week, and then the school locks down, and all of a sudden you got your kids back home and they're homeschooling the next week. And you're at the same time trying to juggle your professional obligations and serve your organization, perform
Yeah.
effectively for your boss. And so we're in a time where there's just a lot of unique pressures, an ever-changing process to try to adopt within to your personal and professional life. And
Sure.
so I think leaders have to understand that it is not business as usual. and everyone who is trying to perform at a high level is being challenged in unique ways. And I think in understanding that, the tactical obligation, in my mind at least, and this is just me speaking, is really to try to build trust, to create presence. You're not walking by each other every day in the office, so you have to
Nope.
go a little bit out of your way to create the connections.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when hierarchical leadership style, sort of the military model, where there was a chief and there was Indians, and they
Right.
lived out of fear. We can't add fear
Mm-mm.
to the culture and the personal lives of our employees, who are already scared to death for a variety of reasons, right? So building collaboration, working in a more uh, shared model of vision, of communication, valuing input,
Yeah.
letting your ego go. I think people will go to the line for you every day when you feel, or they feel, that you trust them, that you value their skills, you value their knowledge, and you embrace that, and you go out of your way to capture it. Um,
Let me
Sitting
interrupt
sitting in
you.
your office and conducting from on high is no longer the style that we can expect to be successful with, and frankly hasn't been for a long time. So
Decades, yes. And one thing you said earlier, and ironically, it came up in a conversation with the guest before you. You said that the leaders have to. I believe, David, that leaders don't have to. They should want to.
sure.
And when we want to serve another human being, when we want to lead another human being the way they want to be led, yes, there are procedures, there are policies, there are things you just don't do, and for that, you get kicked off the team. Or as I like to say, you've now behaved your way out of the company.
Right.
And that's
That's
accountability.
true. I would go back to a comment that you made sort of during the introduction about how when you and I spoke, a connection formed quite quickly and rather deeply, I think, when you met Nick and heard his words and his ideas, the same thing happened. And I think what was going on there is we had three people that were coming at this maybe from slightly different backgrounds and experiences, but we were all very passionate about
Yeah.
what we do and wanting to do it well and wanting to do it in a collaborative style and in a team-based model. And so I think when you approach any assembly, uh, what Hillary said, it takes a village, right? I have yet to work in my career where one person was smart enough to have all the answers to all the questions, right? So you really do have to value the assembly personalities and backgrounds and experiences, because that's where the magic happens, is when you can put that together and create the concept, the service, the enterprise that ultimately brings satisfaction and success.
Yeah, I've been part of many conversations where it's agreed relatively quickly that you actually hire people, you seek people who are smarter and better than you are in key areas of the organization so that you can just allow them to do their job. And there isn't one person that knows everything, and nor should we believe we do, but then that goes back to ego and narcissism and arrogance, which we don't allow on this show.
There's a difference between confidence and helping to develop a vision and a strategy and being part of that conversation,
Mhm.
and arrogance, where you are overconfident, if you will, and you feel like you have all the answers and you don't need the input of others. I think people who approach leadership in that way will really struggle to experience success. There's this old trite saying that um, a leader with nobody following them is just a man or a woman taking a lonely walk. And that's what can happen when you alienate and disassociate your team from yourself.
I often ask my clients to make sure your followers are actually following you. And the only way you can do that is to stop, make sure they're there, make sure they're listening, make sure you're listening and you're engaged. Let's move forward to a topic near and dear to my heart, servant leadership. And certainly the topic of this program, but when you first heard servant leadership, what did it mean to you? And when you hear it today, what do you honestly believe that stands for?
I think of it as if you are in a leadership position, you have probably earned that opportunity. But it goes back again to how are you going to achieve the success that your organization has tasked you with, whether it's your organization or an organization that you work in. And there are a lot of uh, customers, if you want to use that term, of a leader. You're serving your clientele.
Yep.
You're serving your organization. You're serving your team and your colleagues. And again, it just goes back in my mind that it is not about me. It is not about the leader. It is not about my success. It is about creating this ecosystem or multiple ecosystems of people who are engaged, who are passionate,
Yep.
who share the vision, who share the work, and at the end of the day, hopefully share in the celebration. And so I think of a leader needing to maintain that perspective of service across the stakeholders that ultimately come together to have an successful experience.
Beautiful.
So that's the way I would describe it.
No, and again, we don't need to agree on the definition because I want to know yours. Mine is simply that: serve first, lead second. If we show up as a servant, as a parent, we show up as a servant, as a leader, we show up as a servant, as someone who really does care about his or her customers. And I coach in a way to ask my leaders, pretend the people following you are your clients. How may I serve you today? Now, you would ask a real client. In the hospitality business, we're always answering, David Rogers, how may I help you? But when it comes to leadership, we forget the only reason we're important are the people we invited into our organization. So for God forbid if we wouldn't ask them every day or every other day, and please don't tell me that because of COVID, you cannot be an effective servant leader. Because you can connect right here, you can connect right here, you can meet somebody and stay 18 feet apart. You can still have this. So please don't tell me COVID has dented your opportunity to serve others, because that's bull.
Yeah, I think COVID is an important topic. I'd love to talk about my thoughts on how that has created opportunity for us, as well as created, devastation in a variety of ways. But I would argue that this conversation between you and I is more intimate in the way we're conducting it than it probably would be if we were literally sitting in the same room or with a group of people, because we are 100% focused on each other's eyes, on each other's words, and the background chatter is taken away.
Yeah.
And so I do think these kinds of connections can be extremely effective, very intimate and very productive and very thoughtful. And it sort of still matters how you show up. Like if you show up with sort of half checked out and distracted, then of course you're not going to have the same effectiveness. But you and I showed up today. We have a important conversation that we're carrying on, and I couldn't be more engaged with you, even though you're an hour and a half down the mountain from me. So
sure.
Yeah.
It's a choice. It's an absolute choice every day how we want to show up. You brought that up, and I'm going to go with it for a minute, because I ask people to show up exactly how they intend to be, how they want to be. And obviously my focus is around leadership and taking care of those people that are following you. But as owners of organizations, you're also a leader. As a parent, you're also a leader. As someone running a nonprofit, you're also a leader. So my point is, who do you want to be today, and why? And the why is about the other people. And so if you want to bring your team together, you invite them to a Zoom call, Microsoft meetings, or whatever it is you use, and you facilitate a conversation between human beings. They're just all over the screen. It's more difficult because you can't read body language. There could be a couple people checking in and out or checking their phones. But if you ask, put your phone on silent or put it away, remove all the other distractions, as you would if you were in front of one another, then you either trust that they're going to or not. But when you're Zooming somebody and they're constantly looking at a screen while they're talking to you, you know they're not paying attention. So leader, do you have an opportunity to say, hey, Betty, hey, Bob, are you with us? Right? It doesn't matter. And to your point about if we were in a room or in a bar or in a restaurant, there's always stuff going on.
Right.
And it's natural for us to take our eyes off of the person we're speaking to, but at the same time, we can still practice what we believe is important in order to have a true conversation.
Right. Greg, you made a comment about parenting, and it's a thought that resonates with me as it relates to leadership and what our obligation, what our role, what our opportunity as leaders are, and takes it a little bit out of the work environment and
absolutely
turns it into a personal thought. I think about parenting, and I think about what my parents did to raise me. My father has passed away. My mother is 90 and very engaged, and I'm very fortunate for that. But growing up, your parents model behavior for you, right?
Right.
And some of it you see and you think, my gosh, that's perfect. I'm going to replicate that when I become a parent, because it really was effective. And then inevitably there's some things that they do or say, and you say, wow, that does not work for me. And that's not going to show up in my style when I raise my children, because that was hurtful or, not helpful in some fashion. So I like to think about, that same thing as a leader. What are we role modeling? What are our behaviors? What are our words? What are our mannerisms? What are our beliefs? And how are those people that essentially are our own succession plan, taking that information, and are we giving them things that is useful and will be productive and value added for them as they ascend in their careers? Or are we taking them down a rabbit hole that is going to be distracting and not help them be successful? So I think we have an obligation to try to get it right, not only for our own or our organization's success, but also to create that role modeling that our young leaders can grab onto and perpetuate forward. It's a little bit like
Oh, absolutely. And as a father of a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old boy, I'm constantly reminded about the example that I'm setting. And you and I we were talking the other day about what used to be in vogue in the late 60s, early 70s, and obviously through some of the 80s was the parenting model of do as I say, not as I do. So don't pay attention to the mistakes I'm making or how I'm treating your mom or how I'm treating the neighbor or how I'm treating your sister or brother. Don't pay attention to that. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz, right? But listen to what I'm saying, because when I'm speaking to you, it now matters. But don't, and I'm thinking to myself, and you and I that made no sense.
Yeah, no,
we would never show up.
I experienced that message, and it was very confusing to me as a child, and it would certainly be equally confusing to me as a professional. And along the way, we've probably all had moments like that where the message and the expectation and the behavior that was being modeled for us were not in alignment, and they were not constructive or productive, and it either damaged us or it alienated us, or we didn't want to follow.
It confused us.
Yeah.
And it confuses us as followers too when we're in organizations. Well, I would also add that a leader could be following from behind him or herself and allowing somebody else to get us towards our vision.
Right.
David, thank you so much for making time for me today, and I appreciate your interest. I look forward to meeting you in person next week, Wednesday evening and all day Thursday. But again, it's been David Rogers with 408 Productions as a guest here on the Servant Leadership Podcast. And David, thanks again, and we'll see you then.
Thank you, Greg. I look forward to it. It's going to be an exciting day. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.